A firefighter pulled a child from a burning house, but the security footage showed the child walking out alone. The night air was split by sirens. Red and blue lights painted the faces of neighbors who stood helpless on the street, watching flames devour the two-story colonial home that had been the picture of suburban peace just an hour before. The fire had started in the kitchen, they would later learn, but it had spread with a terrifying hunger that seemed almost alive. Now the entire structure was engulfed, windows exploding from the heat, the roof beginning to sag under its own burning weight. Captain James Evans stood at the command point, his weathered face illuminated by the orange glow. At 48 years old, he had seen more fires than he cared to count. His salt and pepper hair was hidden beneath his helmet, his jaw set in that familiar expression of controlled determination that his crew had come to recognize over 2 decades of service. But tonight, something was different. Tonight, the flames seemed to whisper to him in a language he thought he had forgotten. The mother's scream cut through the chaos like a knife. "My daughter! Sarah is still inside. Please, someone help her. She's only 7 years old." Evans felt his blood turn to ice. The battalion chief, Rodriguez, was already shaking his head. "The structure is compromised, Evans. The second floor is about to go. We cannot send anyone in there. It's too dangerous." But Evans wasn't listening anymore. He was somewhere else, in another fire, in another time. He was standing outside a burning apartment building 12 years ago, following protocol, waiting for the structural engineer's assessment, while a 6-year-old boy named Michael Peterson suffocated in the smoke on the 3rd floor. By the time they got clearance to enter, it was too late. Evans had carried that small, lifeless body out into the morning light, and something inside him had died that day too. He had become a by-the-book firefighter after that. No unnecessary risks, no hero moves, just cold, calculated decisions based on protocols and probabilities. It had kept him alive. It had kept his crew alive, but it had also kept him awake at night, wondering if playing it safe was just another word for giving up. Now as he stared at the burning house and heard Sarah's mother collapse to her knees in anguish, Evans felt something crack inside his chest. Maybe it was his carefully constructed wall of professional detachment. Maybe it was the calcified scar tissue around his heart. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something else entirely beginning to break through. "Evans, stand down. That's an order." Rodriguez's voice was sharp, commanding, but Captain James Evans was already moving. His legs carried him forward before his mind could catch up, before doubt could sink its claws into him. He heard his crew shouting behind him, felt hands try to grab his coat, but he shrugged them off. The heat hit him like a physical wall as he approached the front door, which hung half off its hinges, a gateway into hell itself. What does it mean to be a hero? Is it about the person who runs into the fire, or the unseen forces that guide them out? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and tell us which city you're watching from. And if you believe that we are never truly alone in our darkest moments, subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what happens next. Inside the house, the world became a nightmare of heat and smoke. Evans's training kicked in automatically. Stay low, follow the wall, count your steps. The ground floor was an inferno, furniture reduced to skeletal frames, family photographs curling and blackening on the walls. He could hear the house screaming around him, the groan of wood and the crack of glass, the roar of flames consuming oxygen faster than he could breathe. The stairs were ahead. They looked intact, but appearances meant nothing in a fire. Every step could be the one that sent him plunging through into the basement. Evans tested the first step. It held. He began to climb. His breathing labored inside his mask, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his skull. "Sarah! Sarah! Can you hear me?" His voice was muffled by his gear, swallowed by the roar of the fire. "Sarah, my name is Captain Evans. I'm coming to get you, sweetheart. Can you call out to me?" For a moment there was nothing. Then, faint and terrified, a child's voice. "Help me! I'm scared. It's so hot." The sound came from upstairs, from the left. Evans reached the second-floor landing and turned toward the voice. The hallway was a tunnel of fire, flames licking across the ceiling like the tongues of dragons. The heat was beyond anything he had ever experienced. He could feel it through his gear, through his gloves, trying to cook him alive inside his protective shell. He pushed forward. 1 door, 2 doors, 3 doors. Which one? "Sarah, keep talking to me, baby. Which room are you in?" "The one with the stars on the ceiling. Please hurry, the door is too hot." The room at the end of the hall. Evans could see it. The door was closed, smoke pouring from the gap underneath. He reached for the handle, remembered his training, felt the door with the back of his gloved hand. It was scorching. Opening it could create a backdraft that would kill them both instantly. But what choice did he have? That little girl was on the other side, and he was not going to fail another child. Not tonight. Not ever again. He braced himself, turned the handle, and pushed. The door swung open, and for just a fraction of a second, Evans saw something that his mind could not process. In the corner of the room, standing between the flames and a small figure huddled against the far wall, there was a shape. It was human in form, but made of something else entirely. Pure light. Brilliant, blazing light that somehow did not hurt to look at, that seemed to push back the flames and the smoke, as if they were nothing more than shadows fleeing from dawn. Then the ceiling collapsed. Evans felt the impact of the burning beam across his shoulders and head. The world exploded into pain and stars and darkness. He was falling, or maybe the floor was rising up to meet him. He tried to call out, tried to reach for Sarah, tried to do something, anything, but his body would not respond. The last thing he remembered was the smell of his own hair singeing and a sensation of being lifted, gently, impossibly, as if by invisible hands. Then nothing. When consciousness returned, it came slowly, reluctantly, like a diver surfacing from deep water. Evans became aware of several things at once: the softness of grass beneath him, the cool night air on his face, the sounds of shouting and equipment and radios crackling. His mask was gone. Someone had removed his helmet. He opened his eyes and saw stars above him, real stars, not the glow-in-the-dark stickers from a child's bedroom ceiling. "Captain! Captain Evans! Can you hear me?" It was Rodriguez, his face looming into view, etched with concern and confusion. "Don't move. Paramedics are on the way." "What the hell were you thinking, Evans?" Evans tried to sit up, and that's when he realized there was weight on his chest. Small weight. Warm weight. He looked down and saw Sarah, the 7-year-old girl, cradled in his arms. She was unconscious but breathing, her small chest rising and falling steadily. Her face was smudged with soot, but otherwise, impossibly, she looked unharmed. "How did we—" Evans's voice was a croak. His throat felt raw, scorched. "How did we get out here?" Rodriguez stared at him. "We were hoping you could tell us. One minute the house is completely engulfed, the next minute we see you stumbling out the front door with the kid. You collapsed right here on the lawn. Evans, the roof came down 30 seconds after you emerged. 30 seconds if you had been any slower." But Evans wasn't listening. He was looking at Sarah, at her peaceful, sleeping face, and trying to remember. He remembered entering the house. He remembered climbing the stairs. He remembered opening the bedroom door. He remembered the ceiling falling. And then, nothing. A complete blank until waking up on the lawn. The paramedics arrived and took Sarah from his arms. He watched them work, checking her vitals, her oxygen levels, looking for burns or smoke damage. But there was nothing. No burns on her skin. No soot in her lungs. Her oxygen saturation was perfect. It was as if she had never been inside that burning house at all. "This doesn't make sense," one of the paramedics muttered to his partner. "She should have some smoke inhalation at minimum, but her lungs are clear, completely clear." Sarah's mother was there then, falling to her knees beside the stretcher, sobbing with relief, clutching her daughter's hand. Sarah's eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at her mother with a confused, dreamy expression. "Mommy, what happened?" "You're safe, baby. You're safe. The firefighter saved you." Sarah's head turned, and she looked directly at Evans. Her gaze was intense, far too knowing for a 7-year-old. "The bright man carried me," she said softly. "He didn't have a mask on. He wasn't hot." Her mother stroked her hair. "Sweetie, you're confused. This is Captain Evans. He's the one who saved you." But Sarah shook her head with the stubborn certainty of a child. "No, Captain Evans was sleeping. The bright man carried me. He was so bright, Mommy, like the sun." "But he didn't hurt my eyes." The paramedics exchanged glances. Trauma response, their expressions said. The mind protecting itself by creating false memories. Evans had seen it before in survivors. The brain did strange things when confronted with mortal terror. But as they loaded Sarah into the ambulance and drove away, her words echoed in Evans's mind. The bright man. He didn't have a mask on. He wasn't hot. Evans looked down at his gear. His coat was damaged, yes, scorched in places, but not nearly as badly as it should have been. His gloves were intact. The knees of his pants were grass-stained, as if he had been dragged or laid down gently, not as if he had crawled or stumbled through an inferno. And his helmet, which Rodriguez handed back to him, showed surprisingly little heat damage for equipment that had supposedly survived a roof collapse. Something was very, very wrong with this picture. Or perhaps something was very, very right in a way that defied all logic and reason. Over the next 3 days, Captain James Evans became a hero. The local news picked up the story. "Firefighter defies orders to save trapped child," read one headline. "Miracle rescue in suburban blaze," proclaimed another. His phone rang constantly with interview requests. The mayor wanted to give him a commendation. The fire department scheduled a medal ceremony. His crew treated him with a newfound reverence, slapping him on the back, calling him a legend. But Evans felt like a fraud. He couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't saved Sarah at all. The memory gap haunted him. He replayed those final moments over and over in his mind, opening the door, the flash of light, the ceiling falling, then nothing until waking up on the lawn. How had he gotten out? How had he carried an unconscious child down a burning staircase and through a house that had been seconds from total collapse? How had he done it while unconscious himself? The rational part of his brain offered explanations. Adrenaline could do incredible things. Maybe he had been semi-conscious, operating on instinct and training, and his brain had simply failed to record the memories due to trauma. It happened. The human mind was a fragile thing under extreme stress. But the other part of his brain, the part that had seen that impossible flash of light in Sarah's bedroom, that part whispered a different truth, and that truth terrified him more than any fire ever had. On the 4th day after the rescue, Evans was called into Battalion Chief Rodriguez's office. The chief was sitting behind his desk with a serious expression, and seated next to him was a woman Evans didn't recognize. She was in her 30s, wearing a crisp suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Captain Evans, this is Lieutenant Jennifer Walsh from Internal Affairs," Rodriguez said. "Before you worry, this is completely routine. Any incident where protocol is broken requires a full review. It's not disciplinary. We just need to get all the facts straight for the official report." Evans nodded slowly and sat down. "I understand." Lieutenant Walsh smiled reassuringly. "Captain Evans, let me be clear. No one is questioning your heroism or your motives. What you did was extraordinary. But we do need to understand exactly what happened that night for our records. Can you walk me through your decision-making process?" For the next hour, Evans recounted everything. His decision to disobey orders and enter the structure, the conditions inside, finding Sarah's room, the moment of the ceiling collapse, and then the blank space in his memory. Walsh took notes, nodding occasionally. When he finished, she closed her notebook and glanced at Rodriguez. "Captain, I want to show you something. As part of our investigation, we reviewed all available footage from the scene. One of the neighbors, a Mr. Thomas Chen, has a high-definition security camera system that covers the front of his property. His house is directly across the street from the fire location. His camera had a clear view of the entire incident." Evans felt his stomach tighten. "Okay, I'd like you to watch the footage with us," Walsh continued. "It might help fill in those gaps in your memory. Sometimes seeing ourselves from an outside perspective can trigger recall." Rodriguez stood and dimmed the lights. He opened his laptop and turned it toward Evans. On the screen was a paused video image. The burning house across the street, flames clearly visible through the windows, fire trucks in the foreground, firefighters moving about like small figures in the night. "This is time-stamped at 11:47 p.m., Rodriguez said. "According to the dispatch logs, that's approximately 2 minutes after you entered the structure." He pressed play. Evans watched himself disappear through the front door of the burning house. The video had no sound, which made it eerily silent, like watching a film with the volume turned off. He could see his crew gesturing frantically, could see Rodriguez pacing, could see Sarah's mother being held back by neighbors. The seconds ticked by. 10 seconds. 20. 30. The fire seemed to intensify, flames now visible through every window on both floors. Smoke poured from the eaves. The front door, still hanging open, glowed with an orange light from within. "Watch closely now," Walsh said softly. At 11:48:33, the front door moved. A small figure emerged from the smoke and flames. It was Sarah. The 7-year-old girl walked out onto the front porch, moving slowly, almost dreamily, as if she was sleepwalking. Her nightgown was somehow clean, unstained by soot or char. Her feet were bare. She took one step, then another, down the porch steps, onto the front walk, and then Evans saw it. For just a moment, perhaps 2 or 3 seconds at most, there was a shimmer around Sarah, a distortion in the air like heat waves rising from summer pavement. But this was different. This had form. This had shape. It was human-shaped, towering over the small girl, enveloping her like a protective embrace. And within that shimmer was light, brilliant, pure light that seemed to emanate from within, casting no shadows, reflecting off nothing. The shimmer moved with Sarah, guiding her forward. Then, as she reached the lawn, it faded, dissolving like morning mist under the sun. Sarah's legs buckled, and she collapsed gently onto the grass, as if being lowered by invisible hands. The timestamp read 11:48:41. Evans couldn't breathe. He stared at the screen, unable to process what he was seeing. Walsh reached over and paused the video, freezing on the moment of the shimmer, the moment where that brilliant form was most visible. "There's more," Rodriguez said quietly. "Keep watching." He pressed play again. For several seconds, nothing happened. The firefighters on screen hadn't noticed Sarah yet. They were focused on the house, on containing the blaze. Then, at 11:48:55, something impossible occurred. A second figure appeared on the lawn, several feet away from Sarah. It was Captain James Evans, but he didn't walk out of the house, he didn't crawl, he didn't stumble. One moment the lawn was empty, and the next moment he was there, lying on his back, unconscious, positioned carefully, as if he had been placed by someone who wanted to make sure he was comfortable. The timestamp showed 14 seconds between Sarah emerging from the house and Evans appearing on the lawn. 14 seconds. But Evans had no memory of those 14 seconds. No memory of following Sarah out. No memory of anything after the ceiling fell. Rodriguez stopped the video and turned on the lights. The three of them sat in silence for a long moment. Evans's hands were shaking. He gripped the arms of his chair to steady them. "I don't understand," he said finally. His voice sounded distant, not his own. "I don't remember any of that. I remember the ceiling falling. I remember pain. Then nothing until I woke up on the lawn with Sarah in my arms." "But Sarah wasn't in your arms when you appeared on the lawn," Walsh said gently. "According to the video, she was already there, about 8 feet away. One of your crew members, Firefighter Chen, saw her first and shouted. Then he saw you and called for paramedics. It was Firefighter Jackson who brought Sarah to you while they were waiting for medical. He laid her across your chest because he thought you had saved her and should be the one holding her when you woke up." Evans's mind was reeling. "But Sarah told everyone I saved her. Her mother said..." "Sarah told everyone that a bright man carried her," Walsh corrected. "She never said you did. The adults made that assumption because you were the only firefighter who went inside, and you were found on the lawn with her. But Sarah has been consistent in her account. She says a man made of light carried her out of her room, down the stairs, and out the front door. She says he didn't have any firefighting gear on. She says he smiled at her and told her she was safe. Then she woke up on the lawn." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Evans, we've reviewed this footage a dozen times. We've had techs look at it. That shimmer around the girl, that light, and it's not a video artifact, it's not lens flare. It's not smoke or reflection. It's there, it's real, and we have no explanation for it. And there's no explanation for how you ended up on that lawn," Walsh added. "The house was fully engulfed. Every exit was blocked by fire. The staircase you climbed, it collapsed 90 seconds after Sarah walked out. Yet somehow, 14 seconds after she emerged, you appeared on the lawn, unconscious, with minimal injuries considering the circumstances. Your crew didn't bring you out, they were all accounted for at the perimeter. So who did?" Evans looked at the frozen image on the laptop screen. The shimmer, the light, the protective form wrapped around a 7-year-old girl in a burning house. "The bright man carried me." "An angel," Evans whispered. He hadn't meant to say it aloud, but the word escaped before he could stop it. It hung in the air of the office, sounding absurd, and yet completely, utterly true. Rodriguez and Walsh exchanged glances. Neither of them laughed. Neither of them dismissed it. They had seen the footage. They knew that what happened that night defied every natural law. "I'm going to be honest with you, Captain," Rodriguez said finally. "I don't know what to put in the report. If we include this video and these details, people are going to think we've lost our minds. But if we don't include them, we're falsifying an official record. We're giving you credit for something you didn't do. Something I couldn't have done," Evans said. The truth was settling over him now, heavy and wondrous and terrifying all at once. "Chief, I didn't save Sarah. I ran into that house and I got knocked out. Someone else saved her, something else, and whatever it was, it saved me too." "The question is," Walsh said, "how do we document this? And do you still want to accept a medal for a rescue you didn't perform?" Evans was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his career, about his reputation. about what people would say if the truth came out. He thought about the 12 years he had spent punishing himself for Michael Peterson's death, operating from a place of guilt and fear and rigid adherence to rules that couldn't save everyone. Then he thought about that flash of light in Sarah's bedroom, the impossible light that somehow he had seen, even if only for a fraction of a second, the presence that had pulled him from the flames and laid him gently on the grass, the guardian that had carried a terrified child to safety while he lay unconscious and helpless. He had not been the hero that night. He had been the reason a hero appeared. "I want to accept the medal," Evans said slowly, "but I want to tell the truth when I do." The medal ceremony was held a week later in the main hall of the fire department headquarters. The room was packed with firefighters, city officials, reporters, and family members. Sarah and her mother sat in the front row. The little girl was wearing a new dress and kept craning her neck to look at all the firefighters in their dress uniforms. When Captain James Evans walked up to the podium to accept the Medal of Valor, the room erupted in applause. He stood there, looking out at all those faces, feeling the weight of expectation and admiration, and knew he was about to disappoint a lot of people. Rodriguez presented the medal, shaking Evans's hand with genuine warmth. Then Evans stepped to the microphone. "Thank you all for being here," he began. His voice was steady, calm. "Thank you, Chief Rodriguez, Mayor Williams, and thank you to my crew at Station 12. These past 2 weeks have been overwhelming. I've been called a hero more times than I can count. The truth is, I'm not comfortable with that word." A confused murmur rippled through the audience. "The truth is," Evans continued, "I didn't save Sarah that night. I ran into that house, which was against orders and against my better judgment. I found her room, and then the ceiling collapsed on me, and I was knocked unconscious. I have no memory of getting her out. I have no memory of getting myself out. When I woke up, we were both on the lawn, and I had no idea how we got there." The murmur grew louder. Reporters leaned forward, cameras focusing more intently. "There's security footage," Evans said. "It shows Sarah walking out of that house alone, with something protecting her, something I can't explain, something that looked like a person made of light. It shows me appearing on the lawn several seconds later, unconscious, as if I'd been carried and placed there by someone who wanted me to be safe." Sarah's mother gasped. Several people in the audience shook their heads in disbelief. "I'm accepting this medal," Evans said, his voice growing stronger, "but I'm not accepting it as the hero. I'm accepting it on behalf of the unseen partners who walk into the fire with us, the guardians we don't see, the forces we can't explain, the grace that saves us when we can't save ourselves." He looked directly at Sarah, who was staring at him with wide, knowing eyes. She nodded just once and smiled. "For 12 years I've carried the guilt of a child I couldn't save. I let that guilt turn me into someone who was afraid to take risks, afraid to trust anything but protocols and procedures. That night I broke protocol. I ran into that house expecting to fail again. Instead, I was given a gift. I was shown that we are never truly alone in our battles. I was shown that sometimes our job is not to be the hero, but to be brave enough to create the moment when a miracle can occur." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Sarah told us from the beginning that a bright man carried her. I think we owe her the courtesy of believing her. I think we owe ourselves the grace of accepting that some things cannot be explained by training manuals or after-action reports. Some things require faith." The room was silent now. Evans held up the medal. "I dedicate this to every firefighter who has ever felt inadequate, every first responder who has ever wondered if they did enough, every person who has ever walked into darkness and feared they wouldn't find the way out. You are not alone. None of us are. And sometimes the greatest act of heroism is simply showing up and letting something greater than ourselves do the work." He stepped away from the microphone. For a moment, no one moved. Then Sarah's mother stood up, tears streaming down her face, and began to clap. Sarah jumped to her feet and clapped too. Then Rodriguez stood. Then the mayor. Then the entire room rose in a standing ovation that lasted for 3 full minutes. Evans didn't feel like a fraud anymore. He felt like a witness. And sometimes he realized bearing witness to grace was the most important job of all. In the months that followed, Captain James Evans became a different kind of firefighter. He was no longer governed solely by protocol and fear. He trusted his instincts more. He listened to the small voice inside that sometimes whispered directions his training manual didn't cover. His crew noticed the change. He was more patient, more compassionate, more willing to acknowledge the spiritual and emotional toll of their work. He also became a different kind of friend to Sarah and her family. The little girl who had walked through fire wrapped in light remained connected to him in ways that transcended the usual victim-rescuer dynamic. He visited her regularly. They talked about the fire, about the bright man, about what it meant to be saved by something you couldn't see. "Do you think everyone has a guardian angel?" Sarah asked him once. They were sitting in her rebuilt home in her new bedroom with fresh, glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. "I don't know," Evans answered honestly, "but I think everyone has moments when they need one, and I think those moments are when we're most likely to see them, even if we don't realize it at the time." "I saw mine," Sarah said with absolute certainty, "and he told me something before I woke up on the lawn." Evans leaned forward. "What did he say?" "He said that Captain Evans has a good heart, but it's been asleep for a long time. He said the fire would wake it up. Did it?" Evans felt tears prick his eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think it did." Inspired by his second chance, Evans started a foundation called Echoes of Hope. It was a support organization for young survivors of fires and other traumatic rescues. The foundation provided counseling, support groups, and a message that went beyond just processing trauma. It helped children see themselves not as victims, but as living testimonies to resilience, grace, and the unseen forces that protect us in our darkest hours. Sarah was the first ambassador. She spoke at schools and community centers, telling her story with the unflinching honesty of a child. She never wavered in her account of the bright man. And slowly, other children began to share their own stories of impossible rescues, of feeling protected when they should have been afraid, of sensing presences they couldn't see but knew were real. The foundation grew. Evans recruited other first responders who had experienced their own unexplainable moments. The organization became a place where the rational and the miraculous could coexist, where people could talk about guardian angels without feeling foolish, where faith and service merged into something beautiful. Evans kept a copy of the security footage. He had a single frame printed and mounted on his office wall at the firehouse. It was the moment when the shimmer of light was most visible around Sarah, when the protective presence was undeniable, even though it defied explanation. To anyone who asked, he explained it simply. "That's my guardian angel. That's the real hero from that night." Some people smiled and nodded politely, clearly thinking it was a metaphor. Others looked closer, saw the shimmer, saw the light, and walked away quietly with something new to think about. But everyone who saw that photograph, believer or skeptic, felt something, a stirring in their chest, a whisper in their mind, a memory of a moment in their own lives when they should have been lost, but somehow found their way, a time when they should have been broken but somehow held together, an instant when they felt, just for a heartbeat, that they were not alone. 5 years after the fire, Evans was promoted to battalion chief. His first action was to establish a new protocol. Before every shift, his firefighters gathered for a moment of silence. Not prayer necessarily, because the department served people of all beliefs and no belief, but silence, a moment to center themselves, to acknowledge the risks they were about to take, and to open themselves to the possibility that they might be instruments of something greater than themselves. "We are the hands and feet of grace," Evans told them on his first day as chief. "Sometimes we succeed through our training and skill. Sometimes we succeed through luck. And sometimes we succeed because unseen partners walk into the flames with us. Our job is to show up. The rest is up to forces we may never understand, and that's okay." His reputation as a thoughtful, spiritually minded leader spread throughout the fire service. He was invited to speak at conferences and training academies. He wrote articles for professional journals about the psychological and spiritual dimensions of first responder work. He became known as someone who could hold space for both the tactical and the transcendent, but he never forgot where it started. He never forgot that moment of seeing the impossible light in Sarah's bedroom, of being pulled from the flames by hands he couldn't see, of being laid gently on the grass while a guardian angel gave him credit for a miracle he didn't perform. Every year, on the anniversary of the fire, Evans visited Sarah. They had lunch together, just the two of them, and talked about how their lives had changed. Sarah was now a thriving 12-year-old, confident and compassionate, with no fear of fire and no trauma from what should have been a scarring experience. She wanted to be a doctor, she told him. She wanted to help people the way the bright man had helped her. "Do you still think about him?" Evans asked her during their 5th anniversary lunch. "Every day," Sarah said, "not in a scared way, in a grateful way. He showed me that the world is bigger than what we can see, that there are helpers everywhere, even the ones we can't touch. That's a good thing to know, don't you think?" "The best thing," Evans agreed. As he drove home that evening, Evans thought about the journey he had been on, from the jaded, by-the-book captain who was afraid to take risks, to the man he was now, someone who understood that heroism wasn't about being fearless or perfect. It was about being willing to step into the fire, to do what you could, and to trust that when you reached the end of your own strength, grace would meet you there. He thought about Michael Peterson, the boy he couldn't save 12 years ago. For so long, that memory had been a weight around his neck, a constant reminder of failure, but now he saw it differently. Maybe Michael had had his own guardian angel. Maybe there had been unseen hands in that burning apartment building too, hands that carried a small boy home to a place beyond pain and fear. Evans would never know for certain, but he chose to believe it. He chose faith over despair, because that night in the burning house when the ceiling fell and he should have died, something had chosen him. Something had decided he still had work to do, lessons to learn, lives to touch. Something had wrapped him in light and carried him to safety, then given him the credit so that he could heal from his past and step into his future. That was grace. That was love. That was the way unseen heroes worked. They did the impossible, then let you take the bow. They saved you, then helped you believe you had saved yourself, until you were ready to know the truth. Until you were strong enough to accept that sometimes being a hero means being humble enough to admit you're not the hero at all. Evans pulled into his driveway and sat in his truck for a moment, looking at his house, his life, everything he had built since that transformative night. He thought about all the people who had been touched by echoes of hope, all the children who had found healing and purpose, all the first responders who had found permission to acknowledge the sacred dimension of their work. None of it would have existed if he hadn't run into that fire. None of it would have existed if he had played it safe. But also, none of it would have existed without the guardian angel who had done what he could not. Two heroes that night, he thought. One visible, one invisible, one human, one divine. One who ran into the flames and one who carried them both out. That's how grace worked. That's how miracles happened. In partnership, in collaboration between the seen and the unseen, between our effort and heaven's assistance, between our willingness to show up and God's willingness to show up too. Evans got out of his truck and walked toward his front door. As he reached for the handle, he felt it again. That presence, that knowing. The same feeling he had experienced in Sarah's bedroom 5 years ago, just before the ceiling fell. The awareness that he was not alone, that he had never been alone, that none of us ever truly are. He smiled, unlocked his door, and stepped inside. Somewhere he knew a guardian angel smiled too, because the work was not yet done. There were more fires to fight, more people to save. More moments when the impossible would need to happen, when unseen heroes would step into the flames alongside their human partners. And when those moments came, when protocol failed and strength ran out and hope seemed lost, something greater would be there, always there, waiting to carry us home, waiting to wrap us in light, waiting to remind us that heroism is not about being strong enough to save ourselves. It's about being brave enough to trust that we don't have to. Captain James Evans's story spread far beyond his firehouse, far beyond his city. The security footage was never released to the public, but word of it traveled through the first responder community like wildfire. Other firefighters, paramedics, and police officers began reaching out, sharing their own stories of impossible rescues and unexplainable moments. Stories they had kept quiet for years, afraid of being ridiculed or dismissed. There was the paramedic who swore she saw a figure standing over a car accident victim, guiding her hands during a critical procedure she had never performed before. The police officer who felt himself being pulled back from the edge of a rooftop, just as a suspect's bullet passed through the space where his head had been a millisecond earlier. The search and rescue volunteer who found a lost child in a forest by following a light that disappeared the moment the child was safe. These stories had always existed, whispered in break rooms and shared in late-night conversations, but rarely spoken aloud in official settings. Evans gave them permission. He gave them legitimacy. He showed that a person could acknowledge the miraculous without abandoning professionalism, could speak of guardian angels without losing credibility. The Foundation's message resonated particularly strongly with children. Young survivors who had been trapped in burning buildings, pulled from frozen lakes, rescued from collapsed structures, all found their way to echoes of hope. And almost universally, when given permission to speak freely, they described the same thing Sarah had: a presence, a protector, a bright figure who made them feel safe when everything around them was chaos and terror. Child psychologists affiliated with the Foundation began documenting these accounts. Doctor, Patricia Lynn, a trauma specialist who joined the board, found patterns that fascinated her. Children who acknowledge their guardian angel figure, who are allowed to speak about it without adults dismissing or pathologizing it, show remarkably better recovery outcomes, she explained in one of the Foundation's training seminars. They have lower rates of PTSD, better resilience, and healthier integration of the traumatic event into their life narrative. It's as if believing they were protected helps them process what happened in a way that doesn't leave them feeling helpless or vulnerable. Evans listened to Dr. Lynn's findings with interest but not surprise. He knew the power of believing you weren't alone in your darkest moment. It had transformed his own life. For 12 years after Michael Peterson's death, he had felt utterly alone in his failure, abandoned by any higher power that might have intervened. That loneliness had calcified into fear and rigidity. But now he knew better. Michael hadn't been alone in that burning apartment. Evans hadn't been the boy's only chance at survival. There had been other hands in that building, unseen hands, making choices Evans would never understand. And perhaps in a way he couldn't comprehend with his limited human perspective, those hands had carried Michael somewhere safe too, just not safe in the way Evans had wanted. That understanding brought him peace. Not the cheap, easy peace of pretending tragedy didn't hurt, but the deeper peace of knowing that even in tragedy, there was presence. Even in loss, there was love. Even in endings, there were new beginnings. Sarah's mother, Jennifer, became one of the Foundation's most active volunteers. She organized fundraisers, spoke at events, and counseled other parents whose children had survived traumatic incidents. In the immediate aftermath of the fire, she had been a wreck, barely able to function, consumed by nightmares about what could have happened. But as she watched Sarah thrive, as she listened to her daughter's unshakable certainty about the bright man who had saved her, Jennifer found her own faith rekindling. "I was raised going to church every Sunday," Jennifer told a room full of parents at a Foundation event. "But somewhere along the way I stopped believing in anything beyond what I could see and measure. I thought faith was for people who couldn't handle reality. Then my house caught fire, and my 7-year-old daughter was trapped upstairs, and I learned that reality is so much bigger than what we can see and measure. I learned that the universe is full of love, even in the most terrifying moments. Especially in the most terrifying moments." She paused, her voice catching with emotion. "I don't know what saved Sarah that night. I don't know if it was an angel in the traditional sense or some other kind of divine intervention, or a force we don't have names for yet. What I know is that she should have died, and she didn't. Something impossible happened, and I choose to be grateful rather than spend my life trying to explain it away." The audience gave her a standing ovation. In the back of the room, Evans stood with his arms crossed, watching with quiet satisfaction. This was the work, not just healing the survivors, but creating a community where the impossible could be honored, where miracles could be acknowledged, where the boundary between the earthly and the divine could blur without anyone feeling they had to choose a side. The Foundation expanded its mission to include first responders as well as survivors. Evans established peer support groups specifically for firefighters, paramedics, and police who had experienced moments they couldn't explain. These groups met monthly, offering a space where hardened professionals could admit that sometimes they felt guided by something beyond their training. Sometimes they sensed presences at emergency scenes. Sometimes they knew things they had no rational way of knowing. "We are the boundary walkers," Evans told one such group. "We stand at the edge between life and death, between order and chaos, between the natural and the supernatural. Of course we see things others don't see. Of course we experience things others don't experience. That doesn't make us crazy, it makes us witnesses." One of the firefighters in the group, a young woman named Amanda Torres, shared a story that brought Evans to tears. She had been searching a collapsed building after an earthquake. Her equipment indicated no life signs. The structural engineers said the building was too unstable to continue, but she kept hearing a voice, clear as day, telling her to check the southwest corner. She followed the voice, against orders, against logic, and found a teenage boy buried under rubble but still breathing. He survived. "I never told anyone about the voice," Amanda said. "I was afraid they'd take me off active duty, send me for a psych evaluation, but it was real as anything I've ever experienced. And when I found that boy, I swear I felt someone standing next to me, someone who wasn't part of my crew, someone who had been guiding me the whole time." Around the circle, heads nodded. Others had similar stories. The paramedic who felt hands on top of his during CPR, helping him find the right rhythm. The The police officer who heard a whisper telling her to check the trunk of a seemingly abandoned car, where she found 2 kidnapped children. The search and rescue climber who felt himself being steadied on a cliff face during a rescue, even though he was alone on the rope. These were not unstable people. These were professionals with years of training and experience, but they had learned what Evans had learned, that professionalism and mystery could coexist, that being good at your job didn't mean you had to deny the existence of forces beyond your understanding. As the foundation grew, Evans found himself at the center of a quiet movement. It wasn't religious in the traditional sense, didn't align with any particular faith tradition, but it was deeply spiritual. It acknowledged that the universe was far more mysterious and benevolent than most people allowed themselves to believe. It gave permission for the rational and the miraculous to hold hands. Scholars began to take notice. A professor of religious studies from the State University, Dr. Marcus Webb, reached out to Evans about doing a research project on modern experiences of divine intervention. Evans agreed, opening the Foundation's records and introducing Dr. Webb to dozens of survivors and first responders willing to share their stories. Dr. Webb's findings were remarkable. He documented over 200 accounts of guardian angel encounters from the past decade alone, just in their region. The consistency of the descriptions was striking. Figures of light, feelings of profound peace despite terrible circumstances, sense of being carried or guided, protection that defied physical laws. And most tellingly, the aftermath. Survivors and witnesses whose lives were transformed not by trauma, but by the encounter with something transcendent. What we're seeing here, Dr. Webb explained in his published paper, is not mass delusion or wish fulfillment. We're seeing genuine experiences of what can only be described as divine intervention. The evidence is anecdotal, yes, but it's vast, consistent, and transformative. These encounters change lives in measurably positive ways. They reduce trauma, increase resilience, and create lasting psychological and spiritual benefits. Whatever is happening, it's real and it's important. The paper generated controversy in academic circles, but it also generated interest. Other researchers began examining similar phenomena in other regions, other contexts. A pattern emerged. Throughout human history, in every culture, there were accounts of guardian figures appearing in moments of mortal danger. What if, Evans wondered, these weren't myths or hallucinations? What if they were simply reports of something that happened regularly, but was dismissed because it didn't fit into prevailing paradigms? Sarah turned 13, then 14, then 15. She remained as certain about her experience as she had been at 7. If anything, her understanding deepened. She became interested in theology and comparative religion, studying how different cultures understood guardian angels and divine protection. She wrote papers for school about the intersection of faith and trauma, about how believing in protection could paradoxically make people braver rather than more passive. If I thought I was alone in the world, just a random collection of atoms that got lucky, I'd be afraid all the time, she told Evans during one of their anniversary lunches. But I know I'm not alone. I know that when I was 7 years old, trapped in a burning room, something came for me, something that loved me enough to walk through fire. That knowledge doesn't make me reckless, but it does make me brave, because I know that even if things go wrong, even if I end up in danger, I won't be abandoned. None of us will. Evans looked at this remarkable young woman and marveled. She had taken an experience that could have destroyed her and turned it into a foundation for a life of courage and compassion. She was, in many ways, the living embodiment of the Foundation's mission. What do you think the bright man would say if he could see you now? Evans asked. Sarah smiled. I think he'd say that this is why he saved me. Not just to keep me alive, but to let me become someone who could help others believe they're worth saving too. It was a profound answer, and it made Evans think about his own journey. He had been saved that night too, but not from the fire. The fire had already knocked him unconscious. He had been saved from something else, from a life of guilt and fear and self-imposed isolation. The guardian angel had carried him out of the burning house, yes, but more importantly, it had carried him out of the prison he had built in his own heart. That was the deeper miracle. Not just the physical rescue, but the spiritual resurrection. The guardian angel hadn't just preserved his body, it had awakened his soul. As Evans approached his 55th birthday, he began thinking about retirement, not because he wanted to stop working, but because he wanted to devote himself full-time to the Foundation. The organization had grown beyond anything he had imagined. It now operated in 6 states, with chapters forming internationally. They had counselors, support groups, educational programs, research initiatives, and a growing network of survivors and first responders who were changing the conversation about trauma, faith, and healing. The fire department threw him a retirement party. His crew presented him with a custom-made jacket with Battalion Chief Evans, Guardian of Hope, embroidered on the back. His eyes welled with tears as he hugged each of them, these brave men and women who had learned from him that courage and faith were not opposites, but partners. In his retirement speech, Evans returned to the story that had started it all. He showed the photograph from the security footage, the frame with the shimmer of light around Sarah. Many in the audience had heard the story before, but hearing it again from the man himself on the occasion of his retirement gave it new weight. "I became a firefighter because I wanted to save lives," Evans said, "and I have. We all have. But that night, 5 years ago, I learned that saving lives is not something we do alone. We are part of a much larger team, a team that includes forces we cannot see but can sometimes feel. Our job is not to be perfect or fearless or self-sufficient. Our job is to show up, to step into the fire, to do what we can, and then to trust that when we reach the end of our strength, grace will meet us there." He held up the photograph. "This is my reminder. This is my proof. This is the moment when I stopped being a man who thought heroism was about being strong enough to save everyone, and became a man who understood that heroism is about being humble enough to let yourself be saved, to let others be saved, to be part of a miracle you don't control or fully understand." The applause was thunderous. But what moved Evans most was not the applause but the faces. He saw tears on the cheeks of hardened firefighters. He saw thoughtful expressions on the faces of young recruits. He saw recognition, understanding, permission to acknowledge the sacred dimension of their work, permission to believe in something bigger than standard operating procedures. After the party, as Evans was packing up his office, Sarah and her mother arrived with a gift. It was a painting that Sarah had created herself. It showed a burning house, a small figure walking out wrapped in brilliant light, and a firefighter lying peacefully on the grass. But unlike the security footage, this painting showed the guardian angel clearly. It was humanoid but transcendent, with wings of pure radiance and a face that somehow conveyed both infinite power and infinite gentleness. "This is how I remember it," Sarah said simply. "This is what I saw." Evans hung the painting in his new office at the Foundation headquarters. It became the centerpiece of the space, drawing the eye of everyone who entered. Some people saw it as metaphorical, a beautiful representation of protection and grace. Others saw it as documentary, a witness's account of something real and impossible. Evans didn't mind either interpretation. What mattered was that it kept the question alive. What if we're not alone? What if there are guardians watching over us, especially in our darkest hours? The Foundation's work continued to expand. They developed training programs for therapists and counselors, helping mental health professionals create space for spiritual experiences in trauma recovery. They produced documentary films featuring survivors telling their stories. They organized conferences bringing together first responders, religious leaders, scientists, and survivors to explore the intersection of the natural and supernatural. And through it all, Evans remained humble. He never claimed to have all the answers. He never insisted that everyone had to interpret these experiences the same way. He simply created space for the questions, for the mystery, for the possibility that reality was more wonderful and more complex than most people dared to imagine. On the 10th anniversary of the fire, the Foundation organized a major event. Sarah, now 17 and preparing to go to college, was the keynote speaker. She stood before an audience of 300 people, survivors and first responders and families and supporters, and told her story once more. But this time she added something new. "I've been thinking a lot about why the guardian angel gave Captain Evans credit for saving me," she said. "Why did it place me in his arms when I woke up? Why did it let everyone think he was the hero? I think I finally understand. Captain Evans needed to believe he could save someone. He had been carrying the weight of a child he couldn't save for so many years. The angel knew that. The angel knew that Captain Evans needed to wake up holding a living child, needed to experience being called a hero, needed to feel what it was like to be the answer to a mother's prayer. That was part of his healing." She paused, looking directly at Evans, who was sitting in the front row with tears streaming down his face. "The angel saved me from the fire, but it also saved Captain Evans from his past, and then it brought us together so we could help save others. That's how grace works. It doesn't just rescue us from danger. It rescues us into purpose. It saves us so we can become part of saving others. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Evans stood too, clapping until his hands hurt, marveling at the wisdom of this young woman who had taught him as much as he had taught her. After the event, as the crowd dispersed and the sun set over the city, Evans stood in the parking lot with Sarah and Jennifer. They watched the sky turn orange and gold, colors that reminded Evans of fire but no longer filled him with dread. Fire was just fire now. Sometimes it destroyed, sometimes it purified, sometimes it was the backdrop against which guardian angels revealed themselves. "Do you ever wonder if you'll see the bright man again?" Evans asked Sarah. She considered the question carefully. "I see him all the time," she said finally. "Not with my eyes, but I feel him. When I'm scared or uncertain, when I need courage, I feel that same presence, that same peace. He's still here. He's always been here. I think he's here for all of us, but most of us don't notice until we're in a situation desperate enough to make us pay attention." "So the fire was a gift," Jennifer said softly. "A terrible gift, but a gift nonetheless." "All of our fires are gifts," Evans agreed. "Not because suffering is good, but because it's in the fires that we discover we're not alone. It's in the flames that the angels become visible." They stood together in comfortable silence, three people whose lives had been forever intertwined by one impossible night, three people who had learned that miracles were real, that guardian angels walked among us, and that the greatest heroism was often the quietest kind, showing up, staying open, and trusting that unseen hands were always ready to carry us home. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, Evans thought about all the people who would go to sleep tonight, believing they were alone in the universe. People carrying burdens they thought no one else could understand. People facing challenges they were certain they couldn't overcome. People trapped in their own burning houses, literal or metaphorical, seeing no way out. He wished he could tell every single one of them what he had learned. He wished he could show them the photograph, share Sarah's story, make them understand that rescue was always closer than it seemed, that guardians were always watching, that grace was always ready to meet us at the end of our own strength. But he couldn't reach everyone. None of us can. All we can do is tell our stories, shine our small lights, and trust that the message will spread the way all truth eventually spreads, from heart to heart, from wound to wound, from one person brave enough to speak to another person, brave enough to listen. Evans had been speaking for 10 years now, and he would continue speaking for as long as he had breath, because this wasn't just his story anymore. It was Sarah's story. It was Jennifer's story. It was the story of every person who had ever been saved by something they couldn't explain. Everyone who had ever felt protected when they should have felt afraid. Everyone who had ever encountered the impossible and allowed it to change their life. This was the story of humanity at its most vulnerable and most elevated. The story of what happens when we stop pretending we're self-sufficient and start acknowledging our need for grace. The story of guardian angels and the people brave enough to believe in them. And it was a story that would never end, because every day somewhere in the world, someone was walking into a fire, and every day somewhere in the world, a guardian angel was walking in with them, unseen but not absent, invisible but not inactive, silent but not indifferent, always there, always watching, always ready to catch us when we fall, to carry us when we can't walk, to place us gently on the grass and let us wake up believing we survived on our own strength, until we're ready to know the truth, until we're strong enough to accept the miracle, until we're humble enough to say thank you to hands we cannot see. That was the lesson Evans had learned in the flames. That was the gift the guardian angel had given him, and that was the message he would carry for the rest of his life. We are never alone, not in the fire, not in the darkness, not in our deepest despair. Guardian angels are real, miracles happen, and sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is not being the hero, but being saved by one. So let me ask you, wherever you are right now, whatever fire you're facing, do you believe? Do you believe that unseen hands might be reaching for you even now? Do you believe that guardian angels walk among us, wearing faces of light, carrying us through flames we cannot survive alone? Comment below and tell us your thoughts. Tell us your city. Tell us if you've ever felt protected by something you couldn't see, guided by a presence you couldn't explain, saved by a miracle you couldn't understand. Your story matters. Your witness matters. You matter. And if you believe, as Captain Evans and Sarah do, that we are never truly alone in our darkest moments, subscribe to this channel, because there are more stories to tell, more miracles to witness, more proof that the universe is not cold and random, but warm and intentional and full of love. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Share it with someone who's fighting their own fire. Share it with someone who feels alone, because maybe, just maybe, your sharing will be the guardian angel in their life today. Maybe your willingness to believe and to speak will be the light that guides them home. This is the story of Captain James Evans and a little girl named Sarah. But it's also your story. It's all of our stories, because we have all been in the fire. We have all needed rescue. And whether we knew it or not, whether we saw them or not, the guardian angels were there. They're still there, right now, in this moment, watching over you, waiting for the moment when you need them most. And when that moment comes, when you find yourself in the flames with no way out, they will come for you. They will wrap you in light. They will carry you to safety. And they will place you gently in the arms of grace and let you wake up to a new life, a new hope, a new understanding. You are not alone. You have never been alone. And the fire that seems like it will destroy you, that fire is just the place where your guardian angel becomes visible. Welcome to Echoes of Hope. Welcome to the truth that sets us free. Welcome to the miracle that changes everything. We are never alone, never, and that changes everything.